Rebuilding carbon-rich agriculture soils is the only real productive, permanent solution to taking excess carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. She's frustrated that scientists and politicians don't see the same opportunities she sees. This year Australia will emit just over 600 million tonnes of carbon. We can sequester 685 million tonnes of carbon by increasing soil carbon by 0.5% on only 2% of the farms. If we increased it on all of the farms, we could sequester the whole world's emissions of carbon. A majority of U.S. high school students say they get bored in class every day, and more than 1 out of 5 has considered dropping out, according to a survey released on Wednesday. The survey of 81,000 students in 26 states found 2/3 of high school students complain of boredom, usually because the subject matter was irrelevant or their teachers didn't seem to care about them. Well, in 2004 we integrated ticketing in southeast Queensland, so we have introduced a paper ticket that allowed you to travel across all the 3 modes in southeast Queensland, so bus, train and ferry, and the second stage of integrated ticketing is the introduction of a smart card, and the smart card will enable people to store a value, so to put a value on the card, and then to use the card for travelling around the system. Those of you who've never heard the term Neo-Latin may be forgiven for thinking it's a new South American dance craze. If you're puzzled when I tell you it has something to do with the language of Romans, take heart. Over the years many classes who have confessed they are not really sure what it is either. Some have assumed that they are so-called Late Latin, written at the end of the Roman Empire. Others have supposed it must have something to do with the Middle Ages. Or perhaps it's that pseudo-Latin which my 5- and 7-year-old boys seem to have gleaned from the Harry Potter books, useful for spells and curses that they zip one another with makeshift paper ash ones. No, in fact, Neo-Latin is more or less the same as the Latin that was written in the ancient world, Classical Latin. So, what's so new about it? For the first time, Japanese researchers have conducted a real-life experiment that shows how some traffic jams appear for no apparent reason. They placed the 22 vehicles on a single track and asked the drivers to cruise around at a constant speed of 30 km an hour. At first, traffic moves smoothly, but soon, the distance between cars started to vary and vehicles clumped together at one point on the track, but the jams spread backward around the track, like a shockwave at a rate of about 20 km an hour. Real-life jams move backward at about the same speed. The ocean has been getting bluer, according to a study published in the journal Nature. But that's not really good news for the planet. It means that the plants that give the ocean its green tint aren't doing well. Scientists say that's because the ocean has been getting warmer. Along the way, we have built unashamedly beautiful buildings, 2 of which have won and been runner-up in the prestigious United Nations World Habitat Award, the first time an Australian building has received that international honour. We rely on older concepts of Australian architecture that are heavily influenced by the bush. All residents have private verandas which allows them to socialise outdoors and also creates some defensible space between their bedrooms and public areas. We use a lot of natural or soft materials and build beautifully landscaped gardens. What is nanotechnology? Well, a report that was put together by a combination of the Royal Society and the Royal Academy of Engineering that came out last summer, identified 2 topics. Nanoscience is the study of the phenomenon and the manipulation of materials at atomic, molecular and macromolecular scales, where properties differ significantly from those on a larger scale. Nanotechnologies are the design, characterization, production, and application of structures, devices, and systems by controlling shape and size at the nanometer scale. So I'll talk a little bit more in a moment about what a nanometer is, but loosely speaking, people think of nanotechnologies as being a sort of 100 nanometers or less.
Dogs aren't just man's best friend. Previous studies have shown that kids with dogs are less likely to develop asthma. Now a new study may show how, if results from mice apply to us. The work was presented at a meeting of the American Society for Microbiology. The study tests what's called the hygiene hypothesis. The idea is that extreme cleanliness may actually promote disease later on. Researchers collected dust from homes that had a dog. They fed that house dust to mice. They then infected the mice with a common childhood infection called respiratory syncytial virus, or RSV. Mice who ate the dog dust were protected against RSV infection symptoms, like inflamed, mucus-coated airways, suggesting exposure helped them stave off the virus. Those mice also had more diverse communities of gut bacteria than control mice did. Researchers say our pets' microbes may colonize our gut too, and help the immune system learn to respond to infections. That's important because when kids develop severe RSV, their risk of asthma goes up. So next time Buster sheds all over the couch, think of it as a bonus dose of probiotics.
Now that story's been scorched, as only part of contingency planning. But it was a symptom of the dramatic turn of events in South Australia, and it flushed out other remarks from water academics and people like Tim Flannery, indicating that things were really much worse than had been foreshadowed, even earlier this year. So is Adelaide, let alone some whole regions of South Australia, in serious bother? Considering that the vast amount of its drinking water comes from the beleaguered Murray, something many of us outside the state may not have quite realized, is their predicament something we have to face up to as a nation?
When density is high enough, our natural reaction to the closeness of all those vehicles behind us is to slow down. This reduces the flow and speed and increases the density, which can cause even more slowness. Eventually, the whole thing grinds down to a low speed. Density is increased by people joining a road from on-ramps, and this causes vehicles to slow down. Therefore, people are generally bad at merging speed. Then some people who have been held up in the left-hand lane move to the middle lane, which causes the same problem in the middle lane. Traffic backs up. Then some people dive from the middle lane into the overtaking lane, and that slows down.
The United States and South Korea announced late Saturday the two countries will end annual large-scale joint military exercises as part of diplomatic efforts to achieve complete denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. In a statement, the Pentagon said Acting Secretary of Defense Patrick Shanahan and South Korea's Minister of National Defense, in a phone call Saturday, decided to end the Key Resolve and Full Eagle series of exercises. The decision comes 3 days after a summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Vietnam that ended without an agreement to resolve the North Korean nuclear crisis. Seoul's defense ministry released a similar statement, according to the Associated Press.
The U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID, recently announced additional assistance to support achieving the goals outlined in the bilateral Development Objectives Assistance Agreement between the U.S. and Nigerian governments signed in 2015. $25 million will strengthen good governance by supporting state governments' efforts to bolster Nigeria's open government partnership commitments to improve transparency and fight corruption. An additional $1.5 million will support a healthier, more educated population in targeted states through the U.S. President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, also known as PEPFAR, for a total of $26.5 million in additional assistance.
India has downplayed the impact of U.S. plans to end New Delhi's preferential trade status that allows duty-free access to products worth $5.6 billion, saying that India has not assured the United States that it will provide equitable and reasonable access to its markets. U.S. President Donald Trump has directed the U.S. Trade Representative's office to remove India from a program that grants it preferential trade treatment. In 2017, India was the biggest beneficiary of the Generalized System of Preferences, which lowers duties on exports from about 120 developing countries. The Indian Commerce Secretary told reporters in New Delhi that India has no plans to impose retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods. China is stepping up its efforts, announcing a long-awaited plan to link up its southern Pearl River Delta into a massive hub of technology, research, finance, and innovation. The possibilities and challenges of the project are both equally challenging and promising, according to analysts. Some describe the plan as an attempt to create a megacity to rival Silicon Valley, the U.S. technology powerhouse that is home to companies such as Google, Facebook, and Apple. But while Silicon Valley has a population of 3.1 million, the Greater Bay Area will link up 9 cities together with Hong Kong and Macau, with a total population of about 70 million, and the economic heft, state media argues, to drive the Chinese economy, let alone the world.
I think that's not going to be such a viable option for Cerberus, but that may be the way that they're going to approach it. Private equity, of course, is supposed to have the advantage of taking management out of the spotlight of quarterly profits and industry analysts and prying shareholder eyes, and that hypothetically gives them a chance to take slower, more patient routes to doing something to turn a company around. I would hope, and I have some, optimism that some of the Cerberus team will have some creativity and imagination.